close your eyes for a second and picture this. You wake up, you stumble into the bathroom, and you flick on the light. Instantly, there you are, staring right back at yourself in the mirror. Throughout the rest of the day, you see your face everywhere, in storefront windows, the glossy paint of parked cars, and dozens of times on the black screen of your phone. You know exactly what you look like because you are constantly watching yourself exist. But now, I want you to strip all of that away. Imagine waking up inside a primitive shelter thousands of years ago. The air is cold, the ground is damp, and the only light comes from a dying fire. You look down at your hands. You can see the dirt under your fingernails. You can look out at the people around you and see the exact shape of their eyes, the lines on their foreheads, the color of their skin. But you? You are a complete mystery to yourself. You have absolutely no idea what you look like. If you want to see your own face, you have to actively hunt for it. You have to trek through the brush, find a stream or a watering hole, and pray the weather cooperates. You bend down over the bank, but the wind is blowing, the water is rippling, and the surface is choked with mud and leaves. You wait, completely still, until the water calms down just enough to give you a glimpse. And what do you see? Not a face, just a dark, shifting shadow. For 99% of human history, this was the reality. Your own face was basically a ghost. Your identity was an internal sensation, while your physical appearance was an exclusive experience reserved almost entirely for other people. Later on, as humans started to use metal more, we came up with the first deliberate attempts to capture our own image. We polished chunks of black volcanic rock. We hammered copper, bronze, and silver into shallow bowls. But these early artifacts were not mirrors, not in any sense we'd recognize today. A polished bronze disc didn't show your actual skin tone. It didn't show the subtle texture of your skin. It just showed a dark, low-contrast shadows. And more importantly, these things were incredibly rare luxuries, locked away in the palaces of pharaohs, emperors, and kings. For the average farmer, soldier, or peasant, a bronze mirror was not something they'd ever see, let alone get their hands on. Your face remained an unmapped territory. The journey from a muddy puddle to a perfect reflection, it's actually a history of violence, secrecy, and profound technological struggle. It's the history of optics. The Romans were among the first to realize that glass could be used for reflections, but their glass was thick, it was full of air bubbles, and heavily tinted with impurities. They tried backing small sheets of glass with molten lead, but the thermal shock usually just shattered the glass. The resulting reflection? It was dull, distorted, and honestly, pretty useless. So for centuries, the true human face stayed hidden in the dark, until the 13th century. On a tiny, heavily guarded island in the Venetian lagoon called Murano. See, the Venetian Republic realized that the artisans who could create perfectly clear glass literally held the keys to immense global wealth. So, they forced all the glassmakers of Venice to move to this island, under the pretext of fire prevention. In reality, it was an industrial prison. If a Murano glassmaker tried to escape the island to sell their secrets to foreign kingdoms, the Venetian Secret Service would hunt them down and execute them. Because the artisans of Murano had discovered cristallo, an incredibly clear, colorless glass, and they figured out how to back it with a flawless, thin blend of tin and mercury. For the very first time in human history, a physical object could replicate the human face with absolute, unyielding accuracy. The impact of this was explosive. These early Venetian mirrors weren't functional bathroom utilities. They were status symbols of the highest order. A single Venetian mirror, measuring just a few inches across, could cost more than a literal ship of war, more than a grand country estate or a masterpiece painting by a Renaissance master. The French Minister of Finance was so obsessed with breaking this monopoly that he actually smuggled 3 Murano glassmakers into France in the dead of night, which sparked a bitter, decades-long diplomatic war. When Louis XIV built the famous Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, it wasn't just an architectural marvel, it was a geopolitical flex. It was a declaration to the world that France had conquered the secret of the human image. Even during the height of Versailles, this clarity belonged only to the top fraction of 1% of society. The rest of the world? Still living in the age of the blur. The true democratization of the human face didn't happen until 1835. A German chemist named Justus von Liebig developed a process called silvering. He created a method that allowed mirrors to be mass-produced cheaply, rapidly, and safely, without using toxic mercury, by applying an ultra-thin layer of metallic silver to glass through a chemical reaction. Almost overnight, the mirror flooded the global market. It moved from the palaces of kings right into the bedrooms of factory workers, farmers, and clerks. For the first time since Homo sapiens evolved, the average human being could wake up, walk to a wall, and look directly into their own eyes in high definition. The psychological foundation of our species was permanently altered. To understand what this change actually did to our minds, we have to look at how people used to think back then. Before mirrors were everywhere, how did you even figure out who you were? How did you build self-esteem when you couldn't actually see yourself? Well, in an ancient tribe, your self-worth came from the inside, not the outside. In our modern world, we tend to think of beauty as something frozen. We judge it based on a picture, a selfie, or what we see in a bathroom glass. We're looking for perfect features in a static frame. But back then, beauty wasn't about how your face looked when it was perfectly still. It was about how you actually lived. Beauty was the way your face lit up when you laughed. It was the warmth in your eyes when you greeted a friend. It was the skills you had, the sound of your voice, and how helpful you were to the people around you. Because you couldn't see yourself, you didn't spend your days judging your own face from the outside. Your confidence was rooted entirely in who you were as a person, not what you looked like. You didn't watch yourself live, you just lived. And this gives us a totally different way to look at one of our oldest stories, the myth of Narcissus. Today, we use the word narcissist to describe someone who is vain, self-absorbed, and obsessed with their looks. We assume Narcissus died at the edge of that pool because he was just incredibly conceited. But think about that story through the lens of history. If Narcissus lived in a world where nobody ever saw their own face, seeing a crystal-clear reflection in a still pond wouldn't make him vain. It would be terrifying, shocking, and completely supernatural. Narcissus didn't die because he was full of himself. He died because looking at his own clear reflection was so alien and so far removed from anything a human had ever experienced that it literally broke his mind. He was paralyzed by the pure psychological shock of seeing his own double for the very first time. Without a mirror, you were completely free from the burden of constantly checking yourself. You didn't walk around wondering, how do I look right now? Instead, you walked through the world wondering, what am I seeing? What can I do? Your focus was directed entirely outward, toward your community and the world around you. Your face belonged to your family, your tribe, and the people who loved you. It was a gift you gave to the world, not a puzzle you were constantly trying to solve by yourself in the dark. But the story didn't stop with the glass mirror. Over the last couple of decades, humanity has taken another massive, completely unprecedented leap. We've gone from a world where we almost never saw our reflection to a world where we see it constantly. We don't just look into bathroom mirrors to check our hair anymore. We carry high-definition cameras in our pockets that don't just reflect our image, they capture it, store it, and broadcast it to the entire world. Through front-facing cameras and digital beauty filters, we've turned our own faces into data points. We are constantly exposed to what we look like, but it's a version of us that has been edited, flattened into a two-dimensional screen, and put out there for everyone else to judge. This non-stop feedback loop has created a uniquely modern mental health crisis. Psychologists notice that when we look at ourselves all day, we start viewing our lives from the outside looking in. We stop experiencing life from the inside out. Instead of just living, we treat our physical bodies like an online profile that we constantly have to manage, edit, and fix up for other people to see. We suffer from higher levels of anxiety and body insecurity than ever before. And the root of this problem lies in the fact that our brains are still wired for the ancient world. We are creatures built for a time when our faces were a blur, forcing ourselves to survive in a world where everything is in hyper-sharp resolution. For millions of years, how you felt about yourself was safe. It was rooted in who you were as a person, the strength of your relationships, and your everyday actions. It couldn't be measured by a quick glance or captured by a camera lens. Perhaps the ancients had it right all along. They were saved from the trap of treating themselves like an object on display by going through life without ever truly seeing their own faces. They understood a basic truth that we have completely lost in our sea of mirrors and selfies. You are not the image trapped behind the glass. You are the person looking out from behind your eyes. And by finally figuring out how to see ourselves perfectly, we might have lost touch with who we actually are.